everybody. This is a remarkable occasion for us. It's been an incredible honor and pleasure to work with Jackie. We started showing her work in 2015, shortly after we had opened. But this show has brought us depth of appreciation for not only her incredible work over a lifetime, but Jackie, the giving teacher and artist that she is. And I don't know how to stress enough what an honor it is for us to be working with her and sharing this beautiful work, this incredible work. I could just go on, but I think most of you have seen the work. Hopefully you've seen it online, if not had a chance to walk through. And just give it the attention that it deserves, because you'll just be amazed. Thank you, Jackie. It is our pleasure and honor to introduce Jackie Abrams.
First, the white elephant in the room. I'm wearing this cord because I have cancer and I'm a hospice patient now. And this is my last show. I'm not going to cry, and this is my last artist talk. And I want to say how honored I am that Jim and speak closer to the microphone. That Jim and Petey have made this possible for me. It's been a pleasure to work with them all along, and to pretty much. I get bored easily when I'm working, and I did series, and I've kept almost one piece from every series as I went along. And so what you're seeing here are my favorite pieces. And so that's what the show is about. It's 45 years. And thank you all for coming. So my brief history: I was an inner city school teacher and community organizer. And in 1975, when I was 26, so that makes me 72 now, I walked into a basket shop of an elderly man. He was 81. He was in West Chesterfield, Mass., and his name was Ben Higgins. And he had learned white ash baskets from his father. And I don't know, I went crazy. I fell in love. The smell of the wood and the baskets, and I had never thought about baskets before, and I went back to see him over and over and over again and convinced him to take a 26-year-old girl who really couldn't do it on as an apprentice, and I spent 6 months with him. And that I obviously stopped teaching, and it changed my life. And so I just wanted, because I was showing this to Petey the other day, and she thought it was so amazing the way you prepare wood for black ash or white ash for making baskets. So the tree grows like this. This is the tree. And then you cut the tree and you knock it down, and then it has the rings on the side. And then you take a mallet and you beat it. For me, because my arms aren't that strong, I kneel down and I have a lignum-vitae mallet, or I don't do this anymore. I used to do this. You pound it, and what happens is that it separates at the spring growth, and what you're left with is the summer growth. So this is the grain of the wood. So when I first started making baskets for 13 years, I made traditional functional baskets of natural materials, and I pounded a lot of trees. So this is this is not prepared. You have to prepare this after it comes off. If the tree is 8 feet long, the strips are 8 feet long, and you have to prepare them. But this is some of the prepared ash from a tree I pounded. This one was from 1985, and you can see it's rough on the inside and smooth on the outside. This is called satin because you split it in half. But this is one of the materials that I worked with for 13 years. I also did. Oh, I got louder. I got closer. I used reed, which is a purchased material, another natural material. I collected Virginia creeper, I collected grapevines, I collected cattail leaves. Anything was fair game. This is another style of basket that I used to do, and these are called ribbed or melon baskets. And these are more common in the southeast of the United States, and you would make this so it would fit on the horse's neck. So when you were sitting on the horse and galloping along, this would fit on the horse's neck, and if you were carrying eggs, the eggs could easily nestle in there and not get broken. So for 13 years, that's what I did. I was quite happy. I moved to Vermont in mid-70s, to central Vermont. I had 2 kids. I was working at home. I had a studio. And then I got really bored, because when you're working with just function, you have a lot of things to think about. You have to think about the handle, and does it carry well? You can't have a big round basket and an overhead handle, because you can't carry it, and you have to think about, is it strong enough to carry what you're carrying? And so after 13 years, I had a business called Willie Hill Baskets. I lived on Willie Hill Road in Topsom, Vermont, and I was done. So what we thought is that as we go along here, we would take like 2 or 3 questions, if there are any, now before we move on to the next section. So any questions that anyone has? Or we'll keep going?
I have a question, Jackie.
Yeah?
Your mentor, did he ever see what you ended up, I mean, he was older when you met him, so
Yeah.
maybe
He
he wasn't able to see what the fruit of,
He would not have considered what I was doing real baskets,
okay.
ever.
All right.
Ever. His wife taught me twining. I worked with him 4 days a week, and his wife taught me twining, which is this, and he did not consider that a real basket either.
Okay.
So no. No. Any other questions about functional baskets or materials? Susan?
What baskets was he making? What was the purpose of those baskets?
Very functional farm baskets. He did all white ash. He pounded it with a trip hammer. The shop had, it was in West Chesterfield, Mass. The shop had an old Otto steam engine with a big flywheel, and there were 13 things you had to switch to turn it on, and then step on the flywheel, and it was all the pulleys and the ropes and the clatter, and it ran all the machines in the shop. So we had a trip hammer to pound the wood, and a lever, like a sewing machine lever, up and down. It was from a drop forge. That's what the machine was from. So he made very functional baskets. I did keep some that I made. They're not in the show because my kids took them, but I do have some that I made when I was with him that he would not sign because he did not make them. So, Chris.
When you got to the point when you knew you were done with the functional stage, did you know what you wanted to do after that, or was it just the kind of leap of faith?
I did not know. I just knew that I needed to move forward, that I was bored. I wasn't getting rich from it. If I was getting rich, I thought maybe I would think, well, I should keep at it for the money, but that wasn't a good reason. And so I just it was a leap of faith, and I had a lot of materials. I always had a lot of materials. So I moved along with all the materials that I still had. I still have black ash. I still have a lot of, a lot of my work is about materials and how to use them. So this stage, we're choreographed here, sort of.
Okay. And you wanted one of the bearing witness pieces?
Let's see. The plastic, the growing, bearing witness, yeah. And these can.
And you want these away?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, so I've been making baskets for 45 years. So over all of these years, I've covered a lot of baskets, a lot of materials, a lot of techniques. So I've decided to focus on just one because it's easier than trying to cover everything, because that's impossible. So a very brief worldwide basket history is that there are basically 3 techniques in the whole basket world. And I mean the whole world. And it depends upon what materials grow where you are living. And the same techniques have developed. So for example, if you know baskets of Southern Africa, they're coiled. They have a core, and then they're wrapped around, and they're grasses. And in Southern Africa, they made the same baskets that they make in the Southwest US. Pretty much the same technique, because you have grasses and you need to make a container to carry or to store. You have to figure out how to use them. So the same techniques developed all over the world in response to the materials. So for me, moving forward, it was what techniques what can you do with the materials using the same technique? So I'm going to talk about the technique of twining, which is you start at the center bottom, and then you have vertical elements and you have horizontal elements, and the vertical elements usually, not always, give the strength to the basket, and the horizontal elements are smaller and they twist together. And if you were using natural materials, the rule of thumb is when it's green, if the vine wraps around your wrist, it's good for a spoke, and if it wraps around your finger, it's flexible enough to be a weaver. So that's the general rule of thumb. And twining happened anywhere where there was long vines, because this is best. You could do it with short pieces, but you'd be constantly changing, splicing in, it's called. And so you want to have long vines. So I just want to show you the different ways that twining can be used, and that's a lot of what my work is about and my teaching is about. That I'm not teaching you just to make a basket. I'm teaching you about a technique, and I want you as my student, I want you to go out and I want you to figure out what works for you, what materials work for you, how you want to use these materials, and how you want to use this technique. So this basket is the oldest basket in the show. It's dated 76, so it's one of my earliest baskets. And this is reed, which is an imported vine from, I think, Malaysia or China, reed grows in a lot of places. This one is twined as well. And you can see it's very different, and it's twined with waxed cotton. And there are different weaves that you can do. So on this one, the challenge was, how can I do the same color, but make it interesting? So I added different weaves in here, because that's what I wanted to do. So for me, it's always good to challenge myself. Another challenge was, this one is Hannaford bags. Recognize that color? There are Hannaford bags and red string, or red cotton. It's pearl cotton, I think, but red cotton. So this same technique, when you start to think about techniques, this same technique can be used to create a myriad of things. And my current favorite way of using this twining is this whole series here, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But all of the wire in here, each of these has a wire base, and that's what gives it structure, and that's all twined. So this is called an open twining, the wire in these pieces, and it's the exact same thing as this. Looks very different, but it's different materials. And I just want to say that, one of the other things that I just want to talk about when we're talking about surfaces and materials is that I've done a fair amount of collaboration. I have the work of 3 in here with Josh Birnbaum, who I saw come in someplace, and Deidre, and who else is here? And my friend Marilyn Moore. I don't know where that piece is. Anyway, those were all collaborative pieces. Yeah, I'll take that one, thanks. So this is one with Deidre, and I've also collaborated with Bobby Angel, who's an etcher, a botanical etcher, and some other friends as well. For me, collaborating was just another piece that I did with my dear friend Marilyn Moore. And so to me, collaborating it allows me to look at my materials and my techniques through the eyes of another person, and a new way of seeing things, and to see their techniques, and to see how they can be combined, and what we can do together. Right now, even now, we're thinking about another collaboration if possible. So I like collaborating. I think everyone stands to gain from collaborating, and it's just a new way of looking at things. I really like it. So yeah. So any questions about? I know I've covered a lot of ground right there, but the whole world of basketry. Oh, and I forgot to say, please turn off your phones. Yes?
So I'm curious, did you transition from functional baskets to more expressive baskets at the end of the 13 years, or was that a gradual transition?
It was pretty instant. Yeah, it was pretty instant. I did not know what I was going to do. From from functional baskets, actually, the next place I went to is the ones that we'll talk about in a little while, the ones that are on sticks that are back there. PD will be bringing one of them up. I went to that next because I had all those materials and I had just, anyway. Yeah, so I will talk about that, but it was instant. I have made functional baskets since then, but not really. Yep.
The square basket that you had just up there, that Dee Dee took back, before you started that, did you draw it, or did you have a visual image of what that was going to look like?
Which basket?
The drawing that you just took back.
Growing.
Oh, growing. I had no idea. Well, no, I mean, I do. I did a series of those. I did like 5 or 6 of those. I had the waxed cotton. In part, I was doing it because I'm a teacher, and I was teaching twining, and I think that as a teacher, it's my responsibility to make a lot of mistakes before I start teaching it, so that if someone makes a mistake, I know how to get them out of it. So before I was teaching twining as a way to use different materials, I felt that I needed to experiment a lot on my own.
It's very unusual, that shape. It's
Yeah.
kind of more or less square, but it's got all kinds of
Yeah,
holes in it
yes.
and things like that. So you had no idea.
Well, I sort of had an idea. I did a series of them. So there was a larger black one that was here that went to its new home already. That might have been the first one. And then I thought, well, in a workshop, no one's going to make, that was big. No one's going to make a really big one. So then I got to a size where people might be able to finish it in 2 to 3 days. So, yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Arlene?
You talked about using long vines. There's something called bittersweet that grows around here,
I know bittersweet,
which
yeah.
is horrible. But has anyone tried like anything?
You know what, I used to have bittersweet growing all over my porch. I don't remember exactly why I didn't use it. I think it must have been too brittle. I don't remember exactly, but I'm thinking when I went to bend it, because I would have used it because I was always cutting it back. I think when I went to bend it, it was too brittle and it broke. A vine that's really wonderful to use is kudzu. It doesn't grow around here, but it's a really wonderful vine. It twists and it turns, and when it's fresh, it's really an amazing vine to use. But thank goodness that doesn't grow around here. But the bittersweet, I don't remember exactly why I didn't use it, but I'm guessing it was because it was too brittle. So, okay, let's move on to the next. So the next, let's see, campanula and markings, safari tea, and African jar.
Which one?
Safari tea and African jar. Safari tea is right there. And African jar.
They're all close by. And they're so light.
So,
Which one do you want?
I'll do this one first because I'll do it sort of in order. So one of the reasons that I stopped doing functional baskets and natural materials was because there's not a lot of choice of color when you're using natural materials. Red osier dogwood does hold its color somewhat when it's dry, so you do have that reddish color, but you have brown and beige. And if you wanted to learn about color or use color, you have to use it. You have to practice and you have to make ugly things, and then you learn and then you move forward. And you just can't do that if you're not using it. How can you learn about color if you're not using it? So that was one of the reasons that I left baskets or functional baskets behind in natural materials. Not that I don't still love the materials, I do, but I wanted to learn more about color. And so I started on a series of very traditional baskets. This is like in the early 1990s, very traditional baskets where I could use color, and I figured out through trial and error what kind of paper to use and how to use it. So I finally settled on, I use for those of you who are painters, this is a 140-pound watercolor paper, 100% cotton watercolor paper. And I cut it with a pasta machine. So, I'm going to segue here a little bit. So I have one instructional DVD. It's 2 hours long. There's probably about 50 of them left. And they're you need to have a DVD player, maybe. Anyway, They're by donation to Groundworks. So if you're interested in how to make one of these cat head baskets, you can get it and put money in the box, and then all the money's going to Groundworks. So that's a little segue. So the cat head baskets are very traditional baskets. I learned, the person who taught me to make them taught me using black ash. So my first cat head basket was black ash. And it's called a cat head basket because the ears look like a cat. So, but what it does functionally is it helps to throw the weight out to the side of the basket. So if you were carrying around apples or rocks or whatever you carry around, instead of having a flat bottom and having it push the bottom out, this would throw the weight out to the side. With me coming in at the top, it makes it a little less functional because it does, anyway, if you're making a functional basket, you wouldn't bring it in. But I don't care about functional baskets, and so I'm making baskets that I think will look pretty. That's what I was looking for when I did this whole, I probably have made 500 cat head baskets of every size and shape and color. And so this one I chose to talk about in part because it was about putting the surface, decorating the surface of this, putting colors on the surface. So the weaving on this is not, you can't see it as well on some of the other baskets because it's just sort of obscured by the paint on it. On the inside, you can see it really well. And this one is called Campanula because the campanula is in our garden. So, and then a major part of, I always wanted to go to Africa. I don't know why, all of us have these weird things. I just always wanted to go to Africa, and I was really interested in the houses, the painted houses of northern Ghana and Burkina Faso. They paint also in South Africa, but they use acrylic paints and they're bright colors. And in Ghana and Burkina Faso, they use ochres, so it's much more natural tones. And so I learned a new technique, which is, I don't know what it's called. I call it stitched, where I have the panels and I stitch them together. And so I made this piece, and this was based on the painted houses of northern Ghana. I had never been there. This is all from photographs. And then there is a man, Steve Sipsky, who lives in Boston, and he was one of my regular people who came to my booth and chatted and supported me and bought baskets. And he said, "Oh, that looks like the painted houses of northern Ghana." And I said, yes, that is exactly what it is. So he has been my guardian angel. He got me my first trip to doing craft development work in Ghana in 2005. I meant to count how many times I've been there. 8 or 10 times I've been there. I've been to Africa. I forget the number, something like that, doing craft development work. And what I learned, and then I've also spent the past 2 years in Central America, also doing craft development work. I learned an enormous amount. What to do, what not to do, the many, many ways to not succeed. There are many ways to not succeed. There are some ways to succeed. And I will talk briefly about my biggest success story because I'm really proud. But so anyway, Steve got me going to Africa and got me started to do my craft development work. And I learned that I would be most effective if I worked with women, that African men, for the most part, would take any money and go to a bar. This is a generalization, but it's mostly true. And the women will feed their children and take care of and pay for them to go to school, and so I ended up working only with women. That was one of my things. And I'm going to segue just a little bit. In 2020, just before COVID, I worked with a community called La Carpio. I don't know the politically correct word for it. We used to call it slums. I don't know what you call it anymore. But the slums of San Jose, which is the capital, and I worked with women there in this neighborhood where you couldn't walk around safely without a gun. I mean, it was a really difficult neighborhood, and I worked with them, and they are still making let me grab this. Excuse me. So this was delivered to me on opening night here from Costa Rica. I taught them to make coiled baskets, and they have redesigned what they learned from me, which is exactly what I want them to be doing. And this is a beautiful little lined purse, and that's what they're making and selling. And I know that the Brattleboro Museum Brattleboro Museum had a trip to Costa Rica planned for March or April of last year that was canceled because of COVID. But if any of you are going, this is coming up this year, these products will be for sale at one of the galleries you're visiting. So this is my biggest success story, I think, from Anyway, so back to surfaces and colors, and so making the surfaces look a certain way, or it's really important to me. So this piece is called Safari Tea, and what I'm most proud about this is how the lid fits. It's a really perfect fit. That was hard to do. I know it doesn't look like much, but it was really hard to do. And I think that when you're making things, you always learn. It's always a process. With this, I learned that even though the ink that I had said waterproof ink, I didn't test it out first. And in fact, when I went to put the varnish on it, it started to blur. So that's, I've learned you have to test every product no matter what it says. You have to test the product and see that it really is what it says. And more currently, I'm really interested in making surfaces look like something else. So this is the same twine, the same technique as this with the wire, the same twine, so it gives it a lot of strength. And then it's covered with mulberry paper and acrylic paints and mediums, and when the light shines through it, it's really, I don't know if we can do that. It's really spectacular when the light shines through it. And so that's what I'm trying to do, to play around and see what, if you add paint or if you add acrylic mediums, what it's going to do to the surfaces of the forms that you're creating. So that's sort of the for surfaces and colors. And any questions about any of these? Yeah.
Jackie, do you do a lot of sketching before you finalize your shapes?
I am a terrible sketcher. You can ask many of the people here. Hardly at all. Hardly at all. I mean, I do I do a really rough thing sometimes, but no, I'm not confident about my sketching at all.
So on this, I'll call it the skin on this basket, it looks like it's sort of merged, but is that just the effect that you painted it, or how did it?
So this one was pieces, I'm guessing, it was pieces of paper, so I would take the paper that I'm using and rip it up. And then essentially it's like a collage on top of this, so the little pieces on top. And this one, I don't know that it has any paint on it at all. This one might have been just the acrylic medium. There's another one that's sort of yellowy that does have paint on it, but I think this one is just the paper, and depending upon, I deliberately try to be a little sloppy with it. I don't try to make it all look the same. I want the edge, I want it to be secure, but I'm being neat as a pin is not my goal. Wendy.
So on the African one, do you have all the pieces and start at the bottom and do all of it that way, or do you do it that way?
Yeah. So I took a workshop on how to make molds, and someone taught us how to take cardboard and put it together and then build around that mold and then rip the cardboard out. So that's what the workshop was about, but I liked it well enough to figure out how to make it more permanent. So I did, this was another whole series, I think I did it for like 2 or 3 years, all different shapes. This was probably, the teapot was the end of that series, because that was, And it was a lot of geometric figuring, how do you make it fit together? Yeah. I don't remember how to do it anymore, it was a long time ago. Yes?
Do you impregnate the paper to give it a certain rigidity?
No. So, do you mean like for this or for when I'm weaving?
When you're weaving. When
I'm weaving? No, so I have the watercolor paper, a sheet of watercolor paper, and I paint it, and that makes it more rigid. Although sometimes if I'm going to color it afterwards, I don't have to paint it. And then I weave it and sometimes I put more color on it, sometimes not. And usually, but it depends, I coat it with a varnish. And the varnish makes it stiff and protects it. But if it's like this would have varnish on it, but I wouldn't put varnish on any metallic paint because it would dull down the metallic paint. So it doesn't have to have varnish, but varnish is a good thing to have on it. There is a piece in here in the show that I gave a bath in my bathtub because it was so dusty and I couldn't bring it to the galleries, and it had been varnished, and I knew it had been varnished, so I just ran it under the bathtub. And it dried, and you'll never know. It'll be the cleanest piece in here.
You use a toothbrush too.
I do, yeah,
You use a toothbrush.
yeah.
So for the Ghana house one,
Yeah.
how did you keep that shape while you were stitching those pieces together?
It was hard, but the mathematically, I had figured out first what the shape should be. And so they were all, so I would start off on the bottom, and I don't remember what I did. I think I stitched everything on the bottom. It was sandwiched between an inside and an outside piece, I think. And then I just started sewing up. But each of these panels were on this one, not on every one, but each of these panels. So there's right next to Mary Ann, there's two over there that have photographs on them. So you can see that one is round and the other one is oval. Or Mary Ann, you can just hold it up, please. So you see that one's oval, so that one has different, so the side panels are all the same. I think there are 8 of them, maybe? Yeah, the side panels are all the same, and then there's a flat panel which makes it oval. So there's a lot, but they were the correct shape so that when you, thanks Mary Ann, so that when you sewed them together, they held that shape. It was very fussy. It's very fussy.
Jackie, the cat's head basket, did you paint the watercolor and then cut it and then weave it, or is it painted after you made it?
Both, yeah. Sometimes the painting afterwards came because I thought it was ugly, but sometimes I really planned it and then I didn't really paint it. I painted the inside, so the one side of the paper becomes the inside. So I don't remember with this one, but the inside would usually be painted. And then if I knew I was going to cover it with paint or another surface, I would put on sand or put on something else, then I wouldn't bother painting the outside. But the watercolor paper that I use is 140 pound, so it's pretty stiff, but when you run it through the pasta machine, it's flexible. And it's not wet when I use it, it's dry. When I put these papers on, more of a collage kind of thing, those are wet, because I want those to form around what I want it to form around.
So Jackie, the teapot, that's paper, not fabric?
That's paper.
It's all paper?
It's all paper, yeah.
Did you create that paper, or?
Yeah. And this is, it's really heavy. I'm thinking it's probably 300 pound paper instead of 140. It feels like 300 pound paper. So, and so I would have had these holes, these stitching holes. I would have had a drill. I wouldn't have done that with an awl. It's too heavy, this paper's too heavy to, little Dremel build, those tools? Yeah. So, and yes, this is all paper that I created. So, and so there was a craze that people were making teapots. You were invited to put your work in a teapot show. I don't remember when that was. I don't know. Late 90s, I don't know. There were teapots and you were invited for teapot shows. So I made a bunch of teapots for whatever gallery wanted them. And then I thought, I really like this one. This one, to me, solved so many problems. I mean, I love the way the line, the color. Anyway, I decided I needed to keep it. So this lived, I think Wendy sketched this more than once. This lived in my living room. Well, it's been in my living room since I made it. It never went to a gallery. It just stayed in my living room, and it's been mine all these years. So the part, my kids went through, I just want to say, my kids went through and took all the baskets they want. They wanted much less than I thought they should want. And I want anyone who has kids, you should be aware of that. You might have really special kids, but probably they're not going to want what you think they should want. So so they took what they wanted, and these are all things that they said, well, it's beautiful, Mom, but we don't have room. So anyway, but this is, I thought of all the teapots I made, I thought this was the best one. So, okay. So Okay, so the next, so Suda and Akua baby.
Okay, we'll bring Suda. This is such a favorite.
So,
And you've got to look at the inside. It is such a trip. You want this to sit here?
yeah.
Okay, let me move the other stuff out of the way. I mean sculptures, excuse me.
Can we
What-
see the inside, this side of the room?
Which one?
Can you show us the inside?
Yeah.
We couldn't see it from.
Want me to go around and just show it to people?
And the Akua one as well. So,
I'll get that, yeah.
yeah, so,
Very.
this is from my longest lasting series ever, and this is, I call them women forums, and a lot of it was tied in with my craft development work and what I was experiencing when I was working in Africa, and I just felt that I wanted my work to say something, and that I knew I had the techniques down. I knew how to make beautiful baskets. I knew how to make ugly baskets. I knew that, but I wanted my work to say something. And this was about 2000 or so. And so I started making these forms, and then I started going to Africa, and everything sort of got mixed up together, and what's where and who's what. And I used a lot of, I brought back fabric from Ghana, and I used a lot of fabric and put fabric. That one that sold, that little small one that's probably gone. That had
Kente fabric, right?
Yeah, that's gone. Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah, those were very popular. So and I didn't even keep it. Anyway. So it was all very involved together. And the idea behind the women forums is I wanted to say that and it's not just women, it's just people also, but we are shaped by our experiences. We're not symmetrical, we're never symmetrical. And our stories poke us out and cave us in, and our stories make us who we are and shape who we are, and I wanted to show that. And I also wanted to show that some of them had big openings, some of them had little openings. I wanted people to be encouraged to look inside and see what was inside, because often what was inside someone wasn't visible unless you really took the time to look really carefully and see inside someone. And so that's what I was trying to say with these forums. I have still not lost interest in this whole series, and this has been 20 years that I've been off and on, I've been working on this series. I went through grouping, so I did a lot with African fabrics, and I did that for a few years, where I would take the batik Ghanaian fabrics that I brought home and I would glue it on, and then when you do that, you can't use the pasta machine, then you cut with scissors. Well, all of these were cut with scissors anyway. I wasn't looking for something even. And glue, so a lot of them were that. A lot of them were covered with sand. I had a fabulous sand collection from all over. It was what you could do to the surfaces of it compared to the inside of it, and what you put on it as decoration, as a necklace or a collar, still to this day excites me about what you can do. So this one is called Suda because I was walking with Susan, and she's fluent in Arabic, and I said, I made this really big piece and it's all black, and I don't know, I'm trying to think of a name for it, and Suda means feminine in Arabic, black feminine? Yeah, black feminine, good, in Arabic, so that's why she is named Suda. And she's rough to the touch. You know, she's all sand on the surface, and she's layers and layers of sand. It's black mica sand, and it's layers and layers of sand, and she's pretty stiff, but her inside is very light and open. This one is called Kuwabaiti, and this is a very Ghanaian piece. In Ghana, depending upon the day of the week you're born, you have many different names there. You have a school name, you have a church name, you have a house name, and you also have a name for the day of the week that you're born. So like Kofi Annan, Kofi means boy born on, I don't know, Friday or Thursday, I don't remember. There's a lot of Kofis in Ghana. And Akua is girl born on Thursday. So I happen to be Akua. I found out, I didn't know that. But so this is Akua and Baiti because they have a very traditional printmaking technique there called a dinkra, where they take the bark of the Baiti tree. This is in central Ghana, in Kumasi area. They take the bark of the Baiti tree and they beat it, and they cook it and they boil it down and they make an ink out of it, and then they print with it. but I came home with a jar of the ink, and this is what it's colored with. So it looks very different than paint or the ink that we know, because it is different. It's the ink from the Beatty tree. So this is a Kua Beatty. And I still am intrigued by these forms. I mean, for it to have lasted 20 years, for me to still be doing this is, you know, just, to me it says a lot, that I think it's important. So, any questions about that? About these? No, okay, Beatty.
Go for it, Susie. So many people have asked us what's, I think you hinted at it, the opening and then the collar. There's a collar quality?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share more about that?
I decided that I was not going to make heads or necks, or the one this is sort of a neck, but I decided I tried to make one head and it was awful. It was just awful and it just didn't look right, and I decided that that wasn't important, that I could get across what I was trying to get across without a head. So there are no heads. The one that had a head was trashed. I do believe in trashing work. If your work is ugly, I think you can trash it. And so what I was trying to do is make it like a collar or an opening to give it more of a figurative form. So that's the reason why I have those. And some of them, this Kua Beatty comes in very tight, and this one not nearly so much. So
that answered my question
Okay.
about how you began, and
yeah,
did you arrive on it immediately? But no, you
no.
worked your way.
Yeah, I worked my way into it. And some of them didn't have openings, and some of them had just little slits in the center. But pretty much towards the end, I decided that this was the most effective and what I wanted to do the most. So that's pretty much, this is a more recent piece. This was, I don't remember what year, but, oh, here's another one. So this one is called Autumn, and this one is, the outside is slathered in some kind of acrylic medium with texture, and then layers of paint on it. And she's turned out. So sometimes I turn the collars out because she's looking out more onto the world, and you can see more who she is by looking at her front opening. So I changed them around and I did different things. So on this one, this was probably done from a big roll of watercolor because this is pretty big. On this one I painted the inside, the paper on the inside, and then the outside was white because I knew that I was going to come in and color it afterwards. So, yeah. Okay. So the last series to talk about is the series that I love the most because it's my most recent series. So when I was turning 60, I decided that the 60s would be my best decade. And then when I turned 68, it's like, oh no, now it's like my best decade's over. And now what am I going to do? So I decided that my 70s would be important and that I would make art that was important and that made a difference. And I'm going to read a quote from Nina Simone. I have many quotes, but this is the shortest, and it's, an artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. So I've long been interested in architecture, so let's do red towers and tall houses. So I grew up in and around New York City, and I often saw the skylines, and I've often done architectural pieces. And I don't have examples from every series that I did, but I have from some of them. So this one was where I went after. I think, Dan, you had asked me what I did next. This is what I did next. I had the red osier. You can see it's still sort of red. Oh, it's dated, 1989. So this is still sort of red, the red osier. It's not that red, but it's still sort of red. I had the red osier. I had just learned to weave on a loom. I had the wax linen. I had the raffia that I had dyed. And this is where I went next. And I did a whole series of architectural structures just because I wanted to do architectural structures. And I wove with, there's another piece back there that I wove with black ash because I had black ash. You know, I just wove what I had around. And then I moved along and did other architectural series, including those two over there. This was from 2004. And I deliberately skewed these so that they would talk to each other. And so this is when I was doing, in 2004, so I was doing, I learned how to do hollow core construction, so they're supported inside with mat boards that interlock, and that I call it just supported, I'm not sure what the right words are for it, and then covered with acrylic medium and sand and paint. So I had gone through a series of houses, but I decided now I wanted to do something more with the structures. And so I decided I would do precarious shelters and that I would work on them for 10 years. And I was feeling frustrated because I was doing craft development work and traveling to teach. I wasn't home a lot, but then COVID came along, which we all know is a terrible, terrible thing, but I had an enforced studio residency. And I wasn't traveling because I was traveling a lot, and that was good. That part of it was good for me. I got to stay home. I got to make a pile of really ugly things. I had, no kidding, I was like, you saw some of that pile. I decided to save all the bad things rather than just throw them away. I had an enormous pile of things that did not work. They just didn't work for one reason or another. And then I figured out how to do it. And so this is part of the series. I had a show here, and
Which ones would you like?
I think we can just maybe look at them.
You want to leave them there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I finished, I think there were 20 of them, and I had a show here in January? Yeah, January, February, I had a show here with Erica Radich, and it was about social justice art. My commitment is that all the sales that I've made from this, I donate 10% to Groundworks, which is our housing, shelter, food shelter place. And that's my commitment. And so these were the start of what I thought would be a series of shelters. My intention, I had intentions that aren't going to happen, but was to get bigger and bigger. And so I had stuff in the garage. I had sticks, and I had a lot of. I passed it along to Wendy. I gave her the job of doing some of them. These are all sort of the same structure. These were, I call it prefab housing, where the sides were made separately, and then they were attached together. So it's not really I guess it's prefab housing. And I did about 20 of them. Some of them are sold. This is what we had, and it was just trying all kinds of things, and I wasn't trying to do anything. I was trying to keep it simple. I was trying to make a statement about housing and the state of housing in this country, and how people are, ready to be evicted, and about how people are homeless, and about houses are falling apart. And I wanted people to become aware of it, and I wanted people to maybe donate to their local shelters or to do something. I wanted my art to make a difference, as Nina Simone said. So, and that's why I started the precarious shelters. And I did it because I had time, because I had this residency, and so I wouldn't wish COVID again on anyone. But for my studio time, it was really good that I had it. I had months at home because when you're learning something new, when you're teaching yourself particularly, you have to make a lot of mistakes, and you have to make a lot of bad things, and then you'll figure out where to go from there. So that's what I did. And the very last piece, which you have to see from out front, is called An Empty Shell. And I'm going to end with that, talking about that. So I had, so this series was done. It was at the gallery. Can you go grab it? This series was done. It was at the gallery, and I was still working. And I started this new idea of how I was going to do it. And I had the four sides together, and then I got my diagnosis, and I stopped working. And it was sitting on my workshop, and sitting there, and I wasn't, oops, and I didn't do anything with it. It wasn't stable, and nothing was done. And then I thought, well, then it came up with the name An Empty Shell. Do I need to put a roof on it? No, I don't. There are burnt out buildings everywhere that don't have roofs. And not, certainly in Africa and in Costa Rica, but in Brattleboro, everywhere. And so and then I thought, well, this sort of describes me too. That's how I was feeling at first. And then I thought, no, it doesn't. I'm not an empty shell. I'm a woman form. I still have all these experiences. So this is called An Empty Shell, and it was my last piece. And I like it a lot. I finally felt well enough that I could stabilize it, because this wire is sometimes hard to deal with, but it's stabilized, and here it is. So that's what I have to say. And I'm happy to answer questions or.
What about the shapes behind you?
Yes. Oh, so these were this was in that time when I just left baskets behind, and I was looking for color, and before I learned about paper as a material in paint, I was using ribbons. So I started off with the two pieces in the back corner that are, they're hanging up on the wall, and the structure of it is red osier dogwood, and then the weaving on that is black ash and barks, because I had it around, but then I wanted color. And so I got ribbon, because I got an award at the Stratton Arts Festival, and I said, what do you do with this money? You buy ribbon. What else would you do? So I bought a lot of ribbon. I had the best ribbon supply you can imagine. And so this is ribbon, and this is based on, what is the name of that painting? Oh shoot. City Lights. City Lights is the name of it. It was based on by Paul Cézanne Le Chateau Noir. That was that. So it was based on that. So that was me playing around, random weave. This is all basket techniques, just not basket materials.
I just have to say that it's not your intention when you made that, but the shadows from that piece are incredible. Along with the piece. It's just wonderful how it's displayed.
Thanks. So one other piece from that series over there called What Is to Become of Us, and that's a piece that has, on one side is clean river, clean water. It was made for an environmental show, and then I kept it. Clean sky, and then it transitions to trash. You know, here it is, and here's gray paint, and here's styrofoam woven in, and here's what are we doing to our environment, and there's a statement that goes along with it that was in an environmental show. So, other questions?
Did you ever have a residency at the McDowell Colony in Peterborough?
I did not, no. I guess my residency was my COVID residency. I did not. I thought about it, and I thought about applying, but more to Johnson's. I think McDowell is more for writers, and Johnson is more for makers. I don't know, but I thought about it. But so much of what I do is material based that I can't bring all my materials with me. I mean, my studio was jam-packed full of materials. You know, I had the best sand collection from all over the world that you could ever imagine. And now it's gone to a good home, and it will be well used. I'm very happy to say someone came and picked up all the sand. So. That's important, you know. So,
can you just tell people about what happened to the rest of your collection, and you know your materials and the people who will benefit from it?
Yeah. So here are my girls having to deal with all of this stuff in my house. You know, what are they going to do? But then I had all this. I mean, my house is a collection of my stuff and trades from years of doing craft shows, and but my studio was full of this stuff. And who's going to want this stuff? It was hard to know who would want it, and I didn't want it to end up in the trash. I mean, my sand was valuable, my plastic bags. I mean, there was a lot of stuff. So my daughter was here. She helped me sort of inventory what I had. And two friends, neither of who were here tonight, I don't think, Chris McDermott and Bobby Angel, said they would pack it up, and I made 100 bundles. No, I made 58 bundles that were $100 each. And I said, this will last 10 days. And we called it win-win-win, where you buy one of the bundles, you get a good deal for $100 of stuff, and I get to clean out my studio, and then the money would go to this program, Suffice, in Costa Rica. And I gave it 10 days for it to work, 3 hours. 3 hours, it was unbelievable. I was so, I was so stressed out. It was like, holy mackerel, the emails kept flying in. Within 3 hours, everything was sold out. Bobby and Chris, I sort of bundled it up. Bobby and Chris packed it over 2 days. Holly sent off a lot of it. And I sent a check for $5,800 to Suffice. So that was really, good. And then I got those bags in return. So, yeah. So I'll say that the part of the reason why I think what's happening with Suffice is so important when you do craft development work, it's so frustrating. And sometimes I would be there and I would like come back at night and bang my head against the wall and say, what am I doing here? But when you come home and you look at it afterwards, you get a bigger picture of what you're trying to do. And those women that I met there, and this particularly the women in Suffice, and I had a translator. I've always had translators with me, but my Spanish is not good. But I think that most of the women there were Nicaraguan refugees, not Costa Rican women, I think. And they left something really terrible. You know, you only leave your home if something is really terrible. And so they came there and they're looking to make something better for themselves. And so this is probably going to help them. So.
You've used the phrase craft development numerous times, and I think we can all kind of intimate what that means, but I'm guessing that you have a deeper experience of that. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so it's where you go into well, this is my interpretation, and everyone has different feelings about it, so I'm giving you my feelings about it. Where you go into a community, you have respect for you have to have respect. You can't go in and say, you know, I'm coming in and I'm going to tell you what to do. One of the things is that people have had to assure that there was interest in me coming in, that I was not being forced on them. I developed over the years of doing it a whole list of things that had to be in place before I would go. And that was, there had to be people who were interested already. And I would go in, I would bring tools with me that I could leave behind. So I would bring crochet hooks, or I would bring needles, or I would bring scissors, but I would not bring any materials. They had to have all the materials there. And I tried to teach them to use recycled materials. They used recycled clothing and recycled plastic bags, because they don't have money to buy materials, and the whole recycling thing too. But it's so that they develop a craft that they can then market and sell. And a lot of the problem that I found over and over and over again is the women I was working with did not have the education or the confidence to be in charge. And what I found is that no matter how hard I tried to train them, they did not know how to write the number 7. They did not, they didn't have the confidence to walk into a shop and say, here's our work, will you buy this from us? That's not who they were. And so sadly, the successes were when you had better educated volunteers who stepped in and helped them out. And that was happening in Suffice, and that's part of so one of my other things is there had to be a leader. There had to be an identified leader who could do it, because I could teach them to make something, but they had to be able to market it. And if they couldn't market it, it was a useless skill. So, yeah. So, any other questions?
Can you say something about North Country in Bennington? Can you say
North
something?
Country?
Yeah.
So I'm a strong believer in education, continuing education, both in teaching and in taking workshops. And I won't go into the backstory. Wendy knows of some of this. But in 1990, there was no place for craftspeople of advanced levels, in other words, not beginners, to take workshops. So, I used to be a community organizer. I'd like to organize people. So I organized people from New Hampshire and Vermont. And we started an organization called it was called North Country Studio Conference, then now it's called North Country Studio Workshops. And it took us 3 years to get the first conference going. That was 1993. The first year was at the Shaker Craft Center in Enfield. And ever since then, it's been at Bennington College, and it's more or less every 2 years. And it's 13 to 15 workshops in all. There's painting, and there's baskets, and there's metal, and there's wood, and there's clay, and all different kind of workshops, different teachers every year. And it's not for beginners. Like, I could not take a clay workshop there. And it's to help people learn, because, you know, I used to do the Sunapee Craft Show in the 80s. I did it for like 10 years in New Hampshire. And I went back to visit recently, and there are still some people whose booths are in the same spot and their stuff looks the same. And it's like, whoa, so move forward a little bit, you know, or maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I think it's important for me, and I think to spread that, for people to learn and to expand. If you're being a creative person, then be creative and pursue avenues to be more creative and to expand your skills and experiment on your own as well. I mean, that's very valuable, but anyway, that's North Country. So I'm called the founding mother. Any other questions?
Any more questions? Well, I just wanted to, if there is, go for it, Jerry.
Not a question, but also, Jackie, just thank you for inspiring us, whether we're artists or not, to
Thanks,
move
Terry.
forward.
So I just wanted to say one big super thank you, and how much I've learned from you, of how to live a vital, creative life on every single level.
I forgot to say something really important. The most important and the best things I ever created were my 2 daughters. All of this is nothing compared to my 2 daughters. I just have to say that.
That's one thing,
Okay.
that's great.
Okay.
That's all I really wanted to say. It's such an honor to really, really get to know you from stem to stern, and yikes. I'm just so proud of you and so fortunate to know you, and you've affected so many people's lives. Thank you. Your blessing.
Thanks. And thank you to everyone for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.